On the day the dragon fell, Aegon Rivers was small enough to hide inside a barrel. He smelled pitch and smoke and the sour tang of men's fear, and he knew he should have stayed in the cellar with the cooks and scullions, but the roar outside the walls had tugged at him like a hook. So he'd slipped away while the master of kitchens was shouting at a spit boy, crept up 2 flights of worn stone steps, and squeezed himself into a broken cask in an empty storeroom that looked out over the lake. Through a crack in the staves, he watched Harrenhal at war. The great towers that men in songs called the fingers of the Black King clawed at a sky smeared with cloud and ash. The air shook again, a low, shuddering bellow that seemed to crawl down Aegon's spine and settle in his teeth. A shadow crossed the lake, vast and slow, and the water turned black beneath it. The dragon, he thought, the word swelling like something too large for his bones. He had seen it once before, high and far, a dark speck wheeling above the trident, but never like this. Now it filled the world. His wings beat once, twice, each stroke a thunderclap. Fire shivered along its scales as if its skin were made of embers. The great black head turned, slow and searching, and Aegon felt certain it could see him there. A boy with his eye pressed to a crack of splintered oak. Aegon rides him. The thought was a whisper in the back of his mind, matching the whispers that had hissed through the kitchens for days. Aegon Targaryen, Aegon the dragon, Aegon who meant to be king of all. Below the tower, along Harrenhal's outer walls, men ran like ants. The scorpions stood ready, long black shapes braced against the stone, their iron bolts thick as a man's thigh. Aegon watched lads no older than himself crank the winches, watched gray-bearded veterans squint along the line of the shot, hands steady despite the shaking earth. "Hold!" came the muffled shout from somewhere below his window slit. "Hold! Curse you! Let him come lower." The dragon dipped, the air wailing past its wings. Aegon felt the hairs rise on his arms. The beast opened its jaws and the world turned to light. The first wash of flame poured over the outer wall like molten gold. Stone glowed, ran, blistered. Men became torches. Even at this distance, the heat was a slap, sweat springing out along Aegon's brow. He flinched, eyes streaming, and for a heartbeat he could see nothing but red. But Harrenhal had been raised against fire and fear both. The walls did not crumble. When Aegon dared to squint again, the scorpions still stood. One of them, the great engine his uncle boasted of, the one they had dragged and levered onto the highest curtain, stood unburnt where the flame had broken around it like water around a stone. "Loose!" someone bellowed. The snap of the scorpion's cord was louder than the dragon's roar. Aegon followed the black bolt with his whole body, as if his gaze could shove it faster, surer. For an instant it vanished in the glare of fire. Then the dragon screamed. All his life after, Aegon would hear that sound in quiet moments. In the drip of water in a dark cell, in the rush of wind at sea, in his dreams. A raw, tearing bellow, half fury and half astonishment. The voice of something that had never truly believed it could be hurt. The beast spasmed midair. One wing buckled, flinging a blizzard of sparks. The great body lurched, tumbled, smashed against the upper reaches of Harren's tallest tower in a spray of shattered stone. Men fell. The dragon's tail whipped around the tower once, twice, like a monstrous lash, raking chunks of masonry free. Then it slid, scraping, down the wall, its claws gouging furrows in the black stone, the bolt jutting from its breast like an obscene new limb. The impact when it hit the inner ward shook the barrel around Aegon. He heard something crack in the storeroom, a beam or a shelf. Dust stormed into his hiding place, choking him. He coughed, eyes watering, but he did not look away. The dragon lay broken amid a ruin of stone and men. One wing twitched feebly, the membranes torn. Its head reared once, blood steaming where it poured from the ragged wound in its chest. The long neck arched, and there, on the creature's back, a figure in dark armor stirred. Aegon. That has to be Aegon. The Dragon King tried to rise. One gauntlet hand clawed at the harness. The other braced against the scorched plates of the beast's neck. He slipped, slid down the curve of the dragon's shoulder, caught himself again. For a heartbeat he stood, swaying, staring up at the towering walls that ringed him round. Aegon was not close enough to see his face, but he imagined it anyway. Surprise, disbelief, perhaps a dawning understanding that Harrenhal would not burn, that this black castle his grandsire had raised with Riverlander blood and ironborn gold would stand when dragons fell. Harsh horns blared along the walls. The gates thundered open. Out poured men in castle steel, banners streaming, the silver and black of House Horfront and Center. At their head rode a figure all in mail, his helm crowned with twisted iron spikes. Harren the Black, old and gaunt and terrible, his thin mouth drawn tight. "Take him!" Harren's voice rang off stone. "Take the Dragon King alive." The dragon twisted, trying to rise, one ruined wing scraping a furrow in the mud. His head came up, jaws opening. The men advancing faltered, but only for a heartbeat. Before flame could blossom again, a half-dozen bolts thudded into its neck and skull. The beast shrieked once more, a wet gurgling noise, and collapsed in on itself, the light dying from its eyes. Aegon was still on his feet. He turned toward the soldiers, sword drawn now, the steel dark with soot. Firelight skittered along the edges of his mail. Behind him, flames licked up the broken tower where his dragon had torn Awa. Why, great hunks of stone. Someone loosed an arrow. It glanced off the king's pauldron. Aegon strode toward them. Aegon pressed his face harder against the crack, his breath a rapid scrape. He felt something sharp bite his cheek where the wood splintered, but he did not notice the blood. One man against 100, yet the way Aegon moved, it seemed as if the host advancing to meet him were made of paper. He cut down the first two who reached him in a blur of motion, steel sinking through mail and flesh as if it were water. He ducked an axe, drove his sword up under another man's chin, stepped aside from a spear thrust so deftly it looked like a dance. The scorpion on the wall creaked again. Aegon saw its crew wrestling with something, dragging another bolt into place. "Careful!" someone shouted. "The king wants him alive. Better him dead than loose," another voice snarled back. The din swallowed the rest. Aegon fought his way toward the gate, toward the open space where his other dragon might have come. If it was still alive, if it had not been driven off or slain in some other part of the sky. Men fell around him, screaming and bleeding. The black tower above groaned, shedding more stone. A shadow flickered across the courtyard. Another dragon, smaller, gleaming silver in the murk. It wheeled once, high out of bowshot, then wheeled away again, vanishing into the clouds. Coward, Aegon thought wildly, though he could not have said whether he meant the beast or its rider. On the ground, Aegon faltered. A mace crashed against his helm, staggering him. He dropped to one knee. Before he could rise, a spear point punched through the rings of his mail just below the arm. The Dragon King stiffened. The sword slipped from his hand, falling into the churned mud. "Alive!" Harren shouted again. "I said alive, you fools!" But Aegon's hand scrabbled for the spear, fingers closing around the shaft. He dragged himself along it, closer to the soldier who held it. Aegon saw the man's eyes widen in his soot-blackened face. "Winter?" The word drifted up faint and ragged to the tower, or perhaps Aegon only imagined it. "You don't understand." Then another spear took Aegon in the throat, and whatever he meant to say spilled out in blood instead of words. The Dragon King sagged. The men around him closed in, beating at his body with mace and axe and sword as if they feared he might yet rise again. The black dragon lay dead, its corpse steaming. Smoke crawled along the inner walls, but Harrenhal still stood. When at last the scorpions fell silent and the horns blew victory, Aegon realized his cheeks were wet. He touched his face, surprised to find tears there. They burned almost as much as the heat of the dragon's death. Far below, in the trampled mud of the ward, men began to chant, "Harren! Harren! Harren the Black!" They cheered until even the crows on the towers rose up in a clattering black storm, wheeling away over the lake. 3 years later, The dragon's skull hung above Harrenhal's high hall like a second moon. It jutted from the black stones behind the Black King's chair, jaw agape, teeth longer than a man's forearm. Torchlight painted the hollow sockets bloody. Age and the art of the castle's smiths had polished the bone to a sickly sheen. Aegon had grown taller in those 3 years, his limbs all angles, his hair dark as any trueborn whore's. He wore the plain, unadorned black of a squire rather than the gray rags of a kitchen boy, but he still felt small when he stood beneath that skull. Smaller still when he felt the weight of Harren's gaze upon him. "Stop staring at the bones," growled Ser Jorah Hoare, Aegon's uncle, from somewhere behind him. "You've seen them every day for 3 years. They'll not grow back their fire for you." Aegon shut his mouth. He had not realized it had fallen open. He shifted his grip on the silvered helm he carried and turned toward the great doors instead. There, banners were already being hauled into place by sweating servants. The black longship of House Hoare, yes, but others as well, each on its own tall pole. The golden lion of Casterly Rock, the crowned stag of Storm's End, the green and gold roses of Highgarden, the sky-blue falcon of the Vale, the burning sun and spear of Dorne, the gray direwolf of the north. 7 kings, Aegon thought, rolling the words around in his mind like dice in the palm of his hand. 7 kings under one roof. It had not happened in his father's time, nor his grandsire's, nor his great-grandsires. Not since the days when the Undulls had first come screaming out of the Eastern Sea in their tall white-sailed ships. Harren was old enough to remember 6 different wars between 3 different kingdoms. Now he had the skull of a dragon above his head and all the rest coming to his hall. Aegon shifted again, restless. "Do you think they'll come all at once?" he asked over his shoulder. "Or are we to get a new king each day, like meals?" Ser Jorah snorted. His uncle's hair had gone iron gray since the day the dragon fell, but his arms were still thick as barrel staves. "They'll come as they can. The north will be last. The wolves don't hurry for anyone." "What about the Targaryen bitch?" one of the other knights muttered near the great hearth. "They say she still sits her little rock castle with that pale worm of a son, brooding on the sea. Will she come to bend her dragonless knee?" Laughter rippled through the hall. Came a little too loud, a little too long. Men laughed like that when they were afraid. Aegon glanced up again at the skull. He stared blindly back. "They're not invited," Ser Jorah said. "His Grace has no wish to waste food and wine on exiles. This is a council for kings." Kings, Aegon thought, and Harren, who would be more than that? He had heard his grandsire speaking with his uncle. Late at night, the old king's voice rasping behind the half-open door of his solar as Aegon passed on some errand or other. "Aegon has shown them it can be done," Harren had said over and over. "One land, one rule. Why should I stop at the trident when he would not stop at the neck? Let the dragon die for my lesson. I will have what he wanted and more." If he succeeds, Aegon thought, looking up at the ring of banners circling the high hall, there will be songs about this meeting for 1,000 years. But he remembered the dragon's scream, too, and Aegon's staggering walk toward the spear points. Songs were not always kind. The horn sounded mid-morning, when pale mist still lay thick over the god's eye and light filtered through the smoke holes in the hall's roof like thin fingers. "First," Ser Jorah said, listening, "comes the west." Aegon hurried after him to the outer yard, helm still in his arms. The great doors of the hall rumbled open, letting in a wash of damp air that smelled of lake water and horses. Outside, the world was a blur of gray. Mist on the lake, mist along the shore, mist catching and draping itself from the black towers. The walls of Harrenhal loomed like cliffs in a sea of cloud. Out of that pale murk rode the Lannisters. Their column shone even in the dull light, polished plate bright as coin, banners streaming behind them in proud gold. At their head came a man in gilded mail on a white destrier, his cloak trimmed in cloth of gold that rippled like a second mane. "Keldon Lannister," Ser Jorah said, his voice flat. "They say he was crowned with molten gold when he put down that rebellion in the crag." "They say many things," Aegon answered. His fingers itched. He wanted to reach for a sword, to feel the familiar weight of it at his side, but a squire bore burdens, not blades. Instead, he hugged the helm closer. As the Lannisters clattered into the yard, the black longship's standard dipped once in formal greeting. Trumpets brayed from the walls. Aegon hung back with the other squires and retainers as the Western King dismounted. His movements smooth and practiced, every step measured to be seen. Keldon's hair lay in perfect waves along his shoulders, more silver than gold now, but his face was still handsome, the lines around his eyes and mouth carved into a permanent mask of boredom. He swept the yard with a look that weighed it, judged it, and found it wanting. "Your Grace." Harren stood at the top of the stone steps that led into the hall, flanked by his sons. He wore no crown, he never did. His presence was enough. Black mail, black cloak, black eyes deep in his bony face. "Old King." Keldon's voice rolled easily across the yard. "I see the stories did not lie. The castle is as ugly as they say." "And you are as pretty," Harren answered. There was a flicker in his mouth that might almost have been a smile. "We are both as the gods made us." "Come, you've ridden far. We've meat and wine enough for a lion and his pride." More kings came as the day lengthened. Argilac Durandon from the Stormlands, broad and dark and quick to shout. His banner a crowned stag on black. Mern Gardener of the Reach, plump and courteous. His retainers fragrant with the scent of green herbs and some sweet flower Aegon couldn't name. From Gulltown and the high passes of the Vale came Queen Shara Arryn with her little son in her arms, the boy's eyes wide as he stared up at Harrenhal's towers. From Sunwashed Dorne came Nymer Martell with a train of lean, hard-eyed men and a woman at his side with hair like spilled ink down her back, her spear slung casually over one shoulder as if she meant to use it in the yard later. Each arrival was a small play, a dance of pride and courtesy. Harren spoke words of welcome that did not quite sound like welcome. The other kings bent just enough, smiled just enough, offered gifts wrapped in silk and words wrapped in iron. Aegon watched from the steps when he could, or from corners and doorways when he could not, his mind cataloging faces and voices, gestures and glances. It was late afternoon by the time the direwolf banners appeared on the northern road. The mist had thickened by then, curling thicker in the hollows, smearing the trees into gray smudges. Aegon could hear the hooves before he saw the riders, a low, steady drumming unlike the proud clatter of the western horse or the restless stamping of the Dornish mounts. Solid, he thought, like the sound of a door being barred. "Starks," Ser Jorah said, spitting to one side. "Trust them to keep us waiting. Wolves are always late to supper, but they'll snarl if you don't leave them a seat at table." The northern column rode out of the mist as if shaped from it. They were not as fine as the Lannisters, nor as colorful as the Gardeners, but something about them drew the eye all the same. The men wore plain mail and heavy cloaks of undyed wool and dark fur. Their banners were rougher cloth too, but the device upon them, the gray direwolf on white, seemed to move even when the wind died, its head lifted as if scenting snow. At their head rode a man with a streak of white in his dark hair, though his face did not look old. His cloak was made from the pelt of some great gray beast, the fur thick around his shoulders. Beside him, on a smaller horse, rode a young man perhaps a year older than Aegon himself. "That will be Torrhen Stark," Ser Jorah said. He touched two fingers briefly to the hilt of his sword, a habit, almost a superstition. "And the whelp must be his son." The boy rode well, straight in his saddle, cloak fastened with a snarling wolf's head brooch. His hair, dark and thick, stirred in the damp air. When he raised his eyes toward the castle, Aegon could see they were gray. A pale, clear gray that gave away nothing of what he thought. Aegon realized he was staring. When the northern prince's gaze flicked up and met his, it shocked him like cold water. He looked away quickly, pretending to adjust the helm in his hands. "Remember their names," Ser Jorah murmured as the Starks dismounted. "The West has gold, the Reach has grain, the Stormlands have swords, the Vale has high walls, Dorne has sand and serpents, and we have ships and iron. But the North has the cold, boy. Never forget what that means. Aegon thought of the word he'd imagined Aegon trying to speak as he bled out on Harrenhal stones. Winter. He had never seen snow. Not truly. Once, a few flurries from a sky that could not decide if it wanted to rain or freeze. The flakes had melted on his palm before he could count them. Inside the hall, the fire burned high, a great bonfire in the central hearth that sent sparks scurrying up toward the smoke holes. Hounds sprawled near the warmth, tongues lolling. Servants darted like minnows between trestle tables, laying out trenchers and cups. The kings of Westeros sat each in his place. Harren at the high table beneath the dragon's skull. To his right, Keldon Lannister and Queen Shara with little King Ronald, feet not quite touching the floor. To his left, Nymer Martell and Mern Gardner. Argilac Durrandon took his place lower down the hall, as did Torrhen Stark, who had no taste for sitting within reach of Harren's bony hand. Aegon took his place behind Ser Jorahm's chair, helm under his arm, cup at the ready. The din rolled over him. Laughter, the scrape of benches, the clatter of dishes. The smell of roasted pork and onions warred with the lingering stink of smoke and old blood that never entirely left Harrenhal's stones. A girl slipped into the space at his side, silent as a cat. Aegon nearly dropped the helm. "My lady," he muttered, dipping his head. She smiled up at him, all dark eyes and sharper wit. "You sound as if you swallowed a sand burr, cousin. Am I so fearsome?" "You shouldn't be here, Muriel," he hissed back. "Your grandmother will have my hide if she sees you in the hall today. She's hidden you away these 3 days for fear some king will glance in your direction and decide you'd make a fine hostage or a finer wife." Muriel's nose wrinkled. "I'm tired of being hidden. Besides, let them look. I want to see them as much as they see me." She stood on tiptoe, craning her neck. "Is that the boy from the north? The prince?" Aegon followed her gaze. The northern lad had taken the place beside his father, his back very straight, his hands placed correctly on the table edge, not clutching, not sprawling. His eyes tracked the hall, taking in banners and faces much as Aegon himself had done earlier. "He looks as if someone carved him from ice," Muriel said. "Does he ever smile, do you think? Perhaps if you show him some jugglers," Aegon suggested drily. "Or tell him a jape about how castles melt in dragonfire." She glared at him. "Not funny. You laughed the first time I told it. Only because you fell off the table trying to breathe fire." He almost smiled, but Harren rose to his feet then, and the hall fell slowly, reluctantly, into a hush. "My lords," the Black King said, his thin voice scratching out over the din with surprising strength. "My fellow kings, you have come far. You sit in the hall of the man who slew the dragon and broke the dream of Aegon Targaryen. Drink, and know you are welcome here." It was a welcome of sorts, at least. Cups thumped on tables. Servants moved again, pouring wine and ale. Aegon filled Ser Jorahm's cup, then those of 3 knights beside him, his attention half on his hands and half on Harren. "We have been many things to each other," Harren went on. "Enemies, allies, raiders and raided, conquerors and conquered. The history of the 7 kingdoms is writ in blood and fire. Aegon sought to end that. He wished to make 1 kingdom out of 7. He thought his dragons and his Associ steel could make it so." He paused. Men shifted on their benches. All eyes were on the skull above his head. "He failed," Harren said simply. "He failed because dragons are not gods. They bleed as we saw. Their kings bleed. Harrenhal stands. The 7 kingdoms still stand. But the dream he carried in his breast did not fall with him. He let that hang there a moment like smoke. We have all tasted that dream now," he said. "Some of you have fought against it. Some of you thought to do it yourselves in your own fashion. But hear me." He slammed one bony fist against the arm of his chair. "We are fools if we think that because 1 dragon died, the world will kindly stop changing for us. Essos stirs. Free cities grow fat. New magics, new machines, new ideas hatch across the narrow sea. Aegon's folly has shown every ambitious man from Bravos to Qohor that Westeros can be taken. If we do not stand together, we will fall one by one. And who is to lead this standing together? Argilac Durandon called from down the table, his voice rough as gravel. You, old man? Will you style yourself the Black King of all? There was a sneer in his tone when he said all, as if the word tasted sour. Keldon Lannister lifted his cup, the ghost of a smile on his lips. He has the skull for it, he said lightly. It does lend a certain majesty. Laughter rippled through the hall, though some of it was strained. Harren's gaze did not leave Argilac. Do you think yourself better suited, Storm King? He asked. There was a time you might have been, before the dragon burned your host on the Blackwater. A murmur went through the crowd. Argilac's jaw clenched. You charged his line yourself, I'm told. Brave, foolish. You were beaten before you ever reached his banners. Because you fought alone. Alone, Argilac spat. I had men at my back. Swords enough to drink a river. And where were the rest of us? Harren's hand swept across the other kings. Safe in our own. Wars in our own squabbles because we did not yet see what he meant to do. We watched you fall and thought, good, let the Storm King and the dragon tear each other. We were blind, all of us. I will not be blind again. Queen Shara's voice slipped into the space between them like a knife. So what do you propose, your grace? She asked, her tone smooth as poured cream. A league? Pact? We've had those before. They last until one man sniffs a richer field beyond his neighbor's border. Harren smiled that almost smile again. A new thing, he said. A high king. The word had weight. It seemed to settle on the air itself. Aegon felt Miriel go very still beside him. We all keep our crowns, Harren went on. We keep our lands, our laws, our gods. We keep our quarrels and our pride. But we swear as well to a single lord above us all. A war king who may summon us when Essos comes with sold swords and strange gods. Who may strike down any of us who breaks the peace between kingdoms. Who may wage war in the name of Westeros, not mere whores or Lannisters or Starks. Aegon dreamed of one kingdom. Let us be wiser. 7 we are, 7 we shall remain, but with one to bind us when it matters. And that one is you. Nymer Martell's voice was dry as the sands his men came from. He toyed with the stem of his wine cup, eyes half-lidded. You have a skull on a wall and a song in the mouths of your men. So you think we will give you the right to judge us? To march your ironborn through our lands whenever you please? Harren's gaze flicked to him. You would prefer to kneel to a man from Tyrosh? He asked. Or Bravos? When they come, and they will not care that your deserts are hard to cross. Gold flows from Old Town and Lannisport both. Grain flows from the Reach. Furs and iron from the north. We are a feast set before a table of hungry men. Do you truly think they will never sit down to dine? Mern Gardner dabbed delicately at his lips with a napkin embroidered with tiny golden roses. You speak as if they have not tried, he said. The Volantines sent their armada 50 years ago. We broke it. The Bravosi tried to plant little colonies along the fingers, but the Arryns plucked them up. We are not so weak as all that, Harren. Not yet, Harren agreed. But every year, their ships grow leaner and faster. Their forges burn hotter. Their coffers sit heavier. And ours. He looked down the length of the table. We turn our strength against each other. We burn our own fields. We cut down our own sons. Better our own sons than someone else's, Argilac muttered. But he did not raise his voice enough for Harren to answer. It was Torrhen Stark who spoke next. His voice was quiet, but it carried. You ask much, he said. You speak of swearing swords and oaths and futures to a high king. To you, yet we have all shed blood for our crowns. Men have died to keep every one of you on your hard-carved thrones. You would have us tell those ghosts that, in the end, their sacrifice was for a lie. A hush fell. Harren's fingers tightened on the arms of his chair until the knuckles went white. Aegon died for his dream, the Black King said. He died here. His hand lifted, fingers splaying, as if to present the skull behind him. His blood washed these stones, and yet his dream crawls still, like a wounded thing. It will not die, so we must make it our own. Better that than to see it raised again by some other dragon or foreign lord. You would have us believe it is inevitable, Keldon said, lazy amusement gone from his face now. You would frighten us with Essos and fires and foreign kings. Yet it seems to me that what is inevitable, Harren, is that whoever we raise above us will use that height for his own house first, and the rest of us after. You are not the sort to forget you were once merely king of isles and rivers. Nor are you the sort to share, lion, Harren shot back. Your gold buys much, but not that. Nymer Martell chuckled. Well, I, for one, am delighted, he said. Let the rest of you grow new crowns. Dorne has never sat well with anyone on her neck. Why should we start now? Miriel leaned close to Dagon's ear. He thinks he's clever, she whispered. But my father says Dorne bleeds best in other people's wars. They'll cheer whichever way the wind blows and claim they stood alone all along. Your father says too much, Dagon muttered, though he could not deny the ring of truth in her words. The debate ground on, shifting like a wrestling match, each king testing the others, probing for weaknesses. Oaths were mentioned and forgotten. Old betrayals surfaced like drowned men, pale and bloated and accusing. Dagon's legs ached from standing, but he dared not shift too obviously. Above it all, the dragon skull watched with empty eyes. The ravens came at dusk. The first flurry of wings brought only the usual. A message from Fairmarket about short grain, another from some ironborn captain begging leave to raid the arbor. Harren waved them away. The last bird was different. It was a lean, gray thing with ragged feathers, and it came through the smoke hole in a flurry of soot, nearly dropping onto the fire before it flapped desperately for the nearest beam. The hall fell gradually quiet as it circled, cawing raucously, then settled on the outstretched arm of the castle's maester. From the east, the maester said, squinting at the little strip of parchment tied to its leg. He was an old man, grown stooped in Harrenhal's service. His hands shook a little as he untied the knot. From Massey's hook by the seal. Your Grace, it is marked urgent. Read, Harren commanded. The maester cleared his throat. His voice cracked once, then steadied. To Harren, king of isles and rivers, he began. Word comes from the narrow sea. A dragon has been seen over the waters, flying west, dark green with eider in silver scales upon its back. A murmur rolled through the hall. Dagon's hair prickled. It flew low over Massey's hook, the maester went on. So low, men on the cliffs swear they saw the rider's face. A woman, they say, tall, grim, with a sword at her hip. Visenya, Shara Aaron breathed. The beast took no sheep nor man, the maester read, but flew on westward, toward Blackwater Bay, we think. I send this bird and another to you with all haste. May the drowned god, the seven, and any other gods that listen keep you from Dragonfire. Signed, Ser Harlan Massey. Silence. In it, the crackle of the fire sounded suddenly very loud. Miriel's fingers found Dagon's wrist. Her grip was hard enough to bruise. Keldon Lannister laughed once, sharp and brittle. You bring us here to speak of high kings and foreign threats, he said. And all the while, the dragon you supposedly killed has a sister still alive and flying. Did you think to forget to mention that Harren? She fled like a coward, Argilac said, his voice half defiance, half fear. 3 years of hiding, and now she comes back to haunt us? Let her come. We've scorpions enough for 2 dragons. 1 dragon, Harren said. His voice was flat, expressionless. We killed 1, the other fled. There was a 3rd once, but no one has seen it since the day of Aegon's death. They say it fell into the sea off Crackclaw Point, or limped back to Dragonstone to die. They say many things, Nymer murmured, echoing Ser Jorahm's words from that morning. It seems we were foolish to trust any of them. How many dragons does she have left now, do you suppose? 1, 2, 3 again? More. He smiled, thin and fox-like. Perhaps she has been hatching them like chickens on that little rock. A chill slid down Dagon's spine. He thought of the skull above the hall, of the polished bone and the black, empty sockets. He remembered the way the beast's wing had buckled, the way its body had crashed against the tower. "We broke one," he said, before he realized he had spoken aloud. Ser Jorm's head snapped toward him. "Hold your tongue, boy." But Harren had heard. Somehow, the old man's hearing was always keen when he wished it to be. His gaze speared Dagon like a thrown knife. "You," he said, "Rivers, come here." Dagon swallowed. Miriel's hand tightened once more on his wrist, then let go. He stepped forward, helm tucked under his arm, legs stiff. The hall seemed to stretch around him, the murmurs of men at table at distant surf. He could feel the weight of every eye. "You were there," Harren said. "In the tower the day I killed the black beast. You saw it fall." "I did, your grace," Dagon said. His voice sounded small to his own ears, but at least it did not shake. "I saw it struck by the scorpion bolt. I saw it crash against the wall and onto the ward." "Tell them," Harren rasped. "Tell these kings how a dragon dies." Dagon licked dry lips. The memory rose up, hot and sharp as if it had happened only yesterday. "It screamed," he said quietly. "When the bolt struck it, it screamed." He could have left it there, but some wild, reckless part of him would not let him. It bled, it shook, it struck the tower and fell. Its fire did not save it. The scales did not save it. Its rider did not save it. It died like a great beast, no more. He lifted his eyes, met the gaze of Torrhen Stark across the hall. The Northern King watched him with that same pale stillness he'd shown all day. "We killed it," Dagon said. "We can kill another." "Brave words," Nymer Martell said. "From a boy who watched from a window." Dagon flushed. Harren's bony hand snapped out, slamming down on the arm of his chair. "The boy speaks true," he said. "We killed a dragon once. We can do so again. If Visenya Targaryen comes, she will find Harrenhal ready. Let her come." "And what if she does not go to you?" Shara Aren asked quietly. "What if she flies to Lannisport, to Highgarden, to Winterfell, to Sunspear?" "You speak of readiness as if the rest of us were not target as well." Keldon's mouth thinned. "If she flies to my harbor," he said, "she will find chain nets stretched across the bay and scorpions on every wall. My forge masters have been very busy these 3 years. I am no man's lesson, Harren." "Nor am I," Torrhen Stark added. "You ask us to swear to you because you killed one dragon. Yet that dragon died here at Harrenhal, where your walls are high and your engines many. The north is not built like this black heap. Our holdfasts are stone and wood both. We have no towers as tall as yours. And you have something else entirely to fear." Came a new voice from the doorway. Heads turned. The hall, already tense, seemed to draw tighter. A woman stood just inside the threshold, flanked by 2 men in plain travel leathers. She wore no crown, no heraldic cloak. Her armor was simple, blackened mail reinforced with small overlapping plates of some dull gray metal that drank the firelight instead of reflecting it. Her hair, worn in a tight braid bound with silver rings, was the color of ashes. At her hip hung a long sword whose pommel was carved like a dragon's head. Behind her, the mist outside curled and coiled like breath. Ser Jorm's hand went to his hilt. Dagon dropped the helm, letting it clang forgotten against the flagstones. "Visenya," Harren said. She smiled. It sat oddly on her face, like a garment she had not worn in some time. "Black King," she replied. "I hope I have not come uninvited." The hall erupted into chaos. Knights surged to their feet, hands going to swords. Some men drew, others hovered, uncertain. Nymer's spear sister shifted her grip, eyes narrowing. Queen Shara pulled little Ronald close, one hand slipping to the dagger at her belt. Keldon Lannister sat very still, his fingers tightening on the stem of his goblet until his knuckles blanched. Harren did not rise. His hands rested on the arms of his chair, the nails digging into old wood. "No dragon," he said. Visenya's gaze flicked up, just once, to the skull above his head. Something moved in her pale violet eyes. It might have been grief. It might have been rage. It was gone too quickly for Dagon to name. "Outside," she said. "On the lake. I did not think it courteous to land in your yard again." The word crawled under Dagon's skin. "You flew over Massey's hook," Nymer said lightly. "Our ravens fly swiftly enough, it seems. You must have come very fast, your grace." "Fast enough," Visenya said. "The wind was with me." "And the other dragons?" Shara asked. "Do you have them penned beneath this hall, to burst up through the stones and devour us all?" A faint line appeared between Visenya's brows. "There is only the one," she said. "My sister's dragon fell in the sea. My brothers died here. The last that remained did not take well to chains." Dagon realized he was holding his breath. He let it out slowly, soundlessly. "Then you come alone," Harren said. "Into my hall where my men could cut you down before you reach the third step. You have grown braver with the years, Visenya." "Or more desperate," Keldon murmured. Visenya's gaze swept the hall, taking them all in. Lion and stag, rose and falcon and sun and spear, wolf and ship. "You have grown fatter," she said. "All of you, fatter and more afraid." Argilac barked a laugh, surprised. "Afraid? Look around you, woman. There are 7 kings here, and more swords than you have eyes to count. It is you who should be afraid." "I flew over your lands," Visenya said. "Stormlands, reach Westerlands. I saw burned fields and empty villages. Men in mail tramping where crops should grow. You have turned your wealth into steel and left your people to starve. That is fear. You know the world is changing, but instead of changing with it, you cling to your crowns like drowning men to a spar." She turned back to Harren. "And you," she said softly, "you think killing my brother made you the equal of any dragon. You build your engines and your chains and think you can bind the sky itself." "I did bind it," Harren said. His voice was low now, without heat. "I pulled your brother down from it and fed him to my crows." Visenya's jaw tightened, but she did not look away. "Yes," she said, "you did. You broke his body and his dream both. And because you did, I am here." Silence fell again, deeper than before. "You said we have something else to fear," Torrhen Stark reminded her. His gray eyes were steady. "Other than you and your lone beast. What is it?" Visenya looked at him then, and something shifted in her face. "You are Torrhen," she said, "the king in the north." "I am," he said. "My brother wrote of you," she said. "Before?" She gestured, a small, sharp motion that encompassed the skull on the wall, the yard outside, the memory of burned stone. "He said you were the only one who might have understood." "Understood what?" Keldon demanded. "The true enemy," Visenya said. She stepped further into the hall. Men flinched back despite themselves, as if afraid she might somehow set them alight merely by drawing nearer. Her footsteps rang hollowly on the stone. 3 years ago, when Aegon first set his mind to cross the sea, it was not for glory, she said. Not at first. He had that in him, yes. He was a man for all he rode a dragon. But before the dream of a single crown, there was a different dream. She lifted her hand, touching 2 fingers lightly to her brow, then her breast, as if to press the memory into herself and the hall both. "Dragonstone is more than rock and wind," she went on. "It was raised by Valyria when the freehold still stood. Old magics sleep in its foundations. Some of us feel them more strongly than others. My brother saw things, dreams he could not shake. A wall of ice, higher than any of Harren's towers. A darkness beyond it, full of cold and teeth and blue eyes. Dead men walking where no men should be. And always, 7 kingdoms squabbling beneath the snow, too busy clawing at each other to look north. Dagon thought of Ser Jorum's warning that morning. The north has the cold. Never forget what that means. Old wives' tales, Argilac scoffed. The north breeds such stories the way it breeds wolves. Ghosts in the snow to frighten children. I have real enemies at my borders. You have real enemies beyond your borders, too, Visenya shot back. You simply choose not to see them. My brother believed that if Westeros were whole, it might survive what comes when the snows fall deep and do not melt. He thought a dragon might forge one realm where 7 had squabbled. He was wrong about the dragon. Her gaze flicked up once more to the skull. But he was not wrong about the rest. Torrhen Stark's hands had tightened on the edge of the table. In the north, he said slowly, there are tales of white shadows beyond the wall, of things that walk in storms. My maester says they are only that, tales, but... He trailed off, eyes distant, as if seeing something Dagon could not. You have men there, Visenya said. At that wall. I do, Torrhen answered. Have you not wondered why your ancestors raised it so high? She asked. Why they laid spells in its heartstone. They did not do so to keep out wildlings with sticks and spears. And what would you have us do? Keldon demanded. Melt our crowns down to make swords for your snow ghosts? Give up our lands and titles because your brother dreamed a dream? Visenya's shoulders sagged. Just a little. I am too late, she said quietly. I know that. Aegon's chance to unite you died on these stones. I might have tried again once, with dragonfire and blood, but I have one dragon only, and half a son who has never known a hearth that was not cold for fear fire would draw an assassin's eye. I cannot do what he meant to do. Then why are you here? Nymer asked. Because you are about to do something worse, Visenya said. You are about to set a king above you who will spend the rest of his days using your oaths to settle his petty scores while the true night comes, or you will refuse to raise one at all and fall to fighting among yourselves until nothing is left but bones for the snows to cover. I came to tell you not to choose either. Harren's mouth twisted. We do not need your counsel, dragonless queen. Perhaps not, she said, but you have it all the same. My brother's dream does not die because you slew him, she continued, her eyes sweeping them all, nor because you would twist it into something ugly and small. It sleeps. It will wake again, in another place, another time, in the mind of some other fool who thinks he can save the world with swords and shadows. Perhaps that will be my son. Perhaps it will be one of yours. She dipped her head slightly toward Torrhen, toward Shara, toward even Keldon and Nymer. Perhaps it will be none of them. The world turns. Dragons die. Men forget. But winter does not forget. She turned toward the door then, as if she meant to leave as suddenly as she had come. Wait, Torrhen Stark said. She paused. If what you say is true, he said. If this darkness comes, how long? Visenya's lips pressed together. For a heartbeat, she looked very tired. I do not know, she admitted. Dreams are missed. Perhaps in your son's lifetime. Perhaps his grandson's. Perhaps not for 100 years. But it will come. And when it does, the wall will need more than songs and old stories. That is too far away, Dagon thought, though he did not know whether he meant the north or the future. Argilac laughed, loud and harsh. Listen to yourselves, he said, quaking at ghosts and dreams. I came here to talk of wars I can see with my own eyes. Tyrells at my marches, Blackwater pirates, storm and steel, not snow and shadows. If this is all you summoned me for, Harren, I'll ride for home on the morrow and be damned to the rest of you. You'll sit, Harren snapped. We are not done. You are done, Visenya said quietly. You were done 3 years ago. You just have not yet fallen. Harren surged to his feet, anger lending him a sudden, brittle strength. Guards, he shouted. Seize her. Men moved, some because they were ordered, some because they were afraid to be seen not to move. Dagon found himself standing utterly still, as if rooted. Visenya watched them come. She did not reach for her sword. I will not fight, she said. Not here. Not now. Take me if you wish, Black King. Kill me. Hang my head beside my brother's skull. It will not change what waits in the dark. Her calm was worse than fury. The first of Harren's men reached her, hands outstretched to seize her arms. They never touched her. There was a sound from outside, faint at first, then rising. A deep, thrumming beat, like the pulse of the earth, the rush of a great wind. The torches along the walls flickered, the flames leaning toward the door. "Dragon," someone whispered. The hall exploded into motion. Men shouted, scrambled, overturned benches. Cups crashed to the floor, spilling wine and ale. Aegon felt Miriel's hand grab for him again and caught her without thinking, pulling her closer to the central hearth as if that would somehow protect her from what was coming. The creature's scream tore through the stone like a knife. It was not the same as the one Aegon remembered. That had been a scream of pain and surprise. This was a warning, a challenge, a song of dominion. It cut straight through his skull and set every hair on his body on end. The dragon's shadow washed across the high windows as it passed overhead, vast and sinuous. Smoke poured from its nostrils, trailing behind it like twin banners. Men covered their heads, some dropping to their knees. Others surged for the doors, only to be shoved back by the press. "Hold!" Harren bellowed. "To your posts! Scorpions to the walls! Do you hear me? Move!" They had new scorpions now, more and better than the ones that had felled Aegon's beast. Aegon himself had helped haul them up, had wound their cords until his shoulders ached. But the thought of men standing on the open walkways, aiming at that great green shadow as it swooped and roared, made his stomach twist. Visenya stood untouched in the chaos, a still point amid the storm. "I told you," she said, though it was not clear whether she spoke to Harren, to Torrhen, or to them all. "I did not land inside your walls." The dragon screamed again. The shadow slid away. Men surged toward the nearest arrow slits, craning for a glimpse. Aegon dragged Miriel to the foot of one of the great pillars instead. "Stay here," he said. "Do not move until..." "Until when?" she demanded. Her eyes were huge, pupils blown wide. "Until there is something to do," he said. He had never been more aware than in that moment of the empty place at his hip where a sword might have hung. Moments stretched, full of shouting and the distant echo of boots on stone above as men rushed to the walls. Aegon's mind skittered between images. The black dragon's fall 3 years ago, the green one now wheeling above the lake, Aegon's blood on Harrenhal stones, Visenya's tired eyes. Eventually, the roar settled into a steady rhythm overhead, circling, circling. No new blast of fire came, no fresh crash of stone. A breathless sergeant shoved his way through the hall and staggered to the high table. "Your Grace," he gasped, bending double. "The beast, it flies above the lake, just out of bolt range, comes close enough to be seen, then pulls away. It has not loosed its flame. It merely watches." Keldon laughed again, this time softer. "Smarter than her brother, then." Harren's face had gone ashen with fury. "It taunts us," he snarled. "It thinks to frighten us into submission. It thinks," Visenya said quietly from the foot of the steps, "that if it burns your castle, you will run to your high towers and hide while your men roast below, that you will balk at walking through fire to reach the yard, that you will swagger and roar and throw words, but when the world truly burns, you will cower. And will we?" Nymer Martell asked, sounding almost amused. Visenya looked up at the skull. "You did once," she said. "When Valyria burned, the Freehold's lords screamed and bargained and begged their gods. They had dragons and they had glory, but the fire took them anyway. My house ran. We ran here to this cold, hard rock at the edge of the world. We have been running ever since." She drew a breath. "I am done running," she said. She turned then, not toward Harren, not toward the other kings, but toward Torrhen Stark. "In the north," she said, "you have a wall built to hold back ice and night. In the south, we have dragons built to burn cities and kings. Perhaps between us, in some world where men listen, there might have been a chance." Her mouth twisted. "But I see now I have come to the wrong hall." She lifted her hand and whistled, once, sharp and piercing. The dragon's answer rolled down out of the sky like thunder. In the yard, men shouted. The shadow crossed the high windows again, drawing closer. Heat bled in around the edges of the door, a faint prickling on Dagon's skin. "Stop her," Harren rasped. Kill her now." No one moved. It was not that they feared her steel more than his. It was that, in that moment, they could not look away from the shadow sliding across the stones, from the knowledge that there was a creature just beyond their sight whose breath could turn the hall into a furnace. Visenya walked toward the doors. Each step was measured, deliberate. No one barred her path. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. "You will not raise a high king tonight," she said. "You will not forge 7 into 1. You are not ready. My brother was a fool to think you might be, so you will remain as you are. 7 crowns and 7 prides, 7 hosts and 7 songs. You will bleed each other while Essos sharpens its knives and the true winter gathers its teeth." Her gaze flicked once more to Torin. "Remember what I told you," she said. "When the snows deepen and the dead walk, send for Dragonstone. Perhaps my son or his will be wiser than I." Then she stepped out into the night. Heat flooded the threshold. The dragon's shadow swallowed her. The hall cowered back as one. There was a sound like the world cracking open. Fire roared, but it did not pour into the hall. It washed over the yard outside instead. A sheet of green-gold flame that lit the rafters from below made the dragon's skull glow sickly. Men shouted, screamed, then, amazingly, laughed. Not with mirth, but with something harsh and defiant. Harren's men had seen dragonfire before and lived. That knowledge burned in them now like its own kind of flame. When the dragon's bellow faded, when the wash of heat drew back, when the echo of wings dwindled into the distance at last, the hall was left in a strange, echoing quiet. No scorpions had loosed, no new bolts had flown. The dragon had not tried to burn the castle down, and the castle had not tried to tear it from the sky. They had regarded each other, measured each other, and withdrawn. Harren sank slowly back into his chair. "She came to my hall," he said at last. "She dared. She came unarmed," Keldon observed. "She spoke her piece and left. There is a kind of courage in that." "There is madness," Argilac growled. "Snow ghosts and dead men walking. Dreams in old stones. Bah, I have no patience for it. Nor for this talk of high kings. I will not give up one drop of my Stormland blood so that Harren can sit his bony arse on a taller chair." "You mistake me," Harren snapped. "I do not ask you to give up blood. I ask you to share it." "That is no better," Argilac said. He shoved his bench back and rose. "I am done with this. If the rest of you wish to kneel to the Black King, do so. I have marches to guard." He stalked out of the hall, his men falling in behind him. Nymer Martell rose more slowly, stretching like a cat. "I have seen what I came to see," he said. "A dragon, a skull, and 7 men who will never agree on anything that does not profit them directly. Dorn will keep her sands and her spears. If Essos comes, we will bleed them and slip away, as we always have." "Coward," Keldon said lightly. "Pragmatist," Nymer corrected. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Though I wish you joy of your new alliances, should you manage any." He too took his leave. One by one, the rest followed. Keldon retired to his chambers to send ravens of his own. Myrn drifted away with a thoughtful frown, already calculating harvests and levies. Shara drew little Ronald close and left without a backward glance, her face unreadable. Torin lingered longest, talking quietly with his son, their heads bent together. Dagon watched them, wondering what words passed between wolves in such a moment. At last, the hall was mostly empty. The dragon's skull loomed above the high seat, its shadow long and crooked in the firelight. Miriel sat beside Dagon on a low bench near the dying hearth. Someone had thrust a cup of wine into his hand without his noticing. He held it now without tasting it. "Do you believe her?" Miriel asked. Her voice was very small in the vast hall. "About snow ghosts and dead men? Or about the rest?" he asked. Any of it, she said. He thought of the wall, which he knew only from maps. A line of blue ink at the top of the parchment, thicker than any river. He thought of dragonfire washing over black stone, of Aegon bleeding out on the stones, of Visenya's weary eyes. I believe she saw something, he said slowly. Whether it is the truth or a dream, I cannot say. I am only a bastard, and a young one at that. You are Aegon Rivers, Miriel said. You saw a dragon fall. You spoke before 7 kings. I think that makes you more than most. He glanced sideways at her, surprised. And you, Miriel Hoare, he said, crept into a hall where 7 kings sat and did not hide. That makes you braver than most. She smiled. Then his words seemed to catch up with her and she sobered. Do you think he will do it? She asked, nodding toward the high seat. Harren sat there still, his sons around him, their heads bent together. The sound of their voices did not reach Aegon. Do what? Aegon asked. Raise himself higher, she said. Call himself High King of Westeros, whether the others swear to him or not. He has the skull. He has the song. Even if the rest of them ride away shaking their heads, our singers will call him that. My father says words have power. They do, Aegon said. He took a long swallow of wine at last. It burned down his throat like a lesser dragon. But words alone will not break the North, or the West, or Dorne. He can call himself what he likes. The others will call him Harren the Arrogant, Harren the Mad, Harren the Old, as it pleases them. And you? She asked. What will you call him? He looked up at the skull. After a moment, he shrugged. My king, he said simply. Miriel sighed and leaned her head briefly against his shoulder, just for a heartbeat. No one was looking. Do you think they will ever do it? She whispered. Unite, all of them, 7 into 1. A high king or a dragon or some other madness. Do you think my children will see it? Aegon felt the weight of the future pressing down. It smelled of smoke and salt and snow. No, he said at last. I think they will tell stories about how it nearly happened once, about how Harren killed a dragon and thought himself the master of the world, about how a woman with a sword and a lone beast came to warn them, and they laughed. And I think they will fight the same wars we do, and sing the same songs, until something comes that does not care for castles or crowns and sweeps it all away. That's a grim tale, Miriel said. It is the only tale I see, Aegon said. Somewhere above them, a raven croaked, uneasy in its sleep. That night, as the king's retinues packed their chests and folded their banners, as the dragon wheeled high over the gods one last time before turning its face once more toward the sea, Torrhen Stark stood alone in Harrenhal's godswood. It was a small, cramped thing compared to the wild groves of the north. A thin stand of stunted oaks around a single ancient weirwood whose red leaves whispered uneasily in the damp air. But it had been there before Harren's walls rose around it, and would likely still stand after they fell. The Northern King rested his hand lightly against the carved face in the pale trunk. Red sap oozed slowly beneath his fingers, sticky as old blood. You hear her, he murmured, though gods were not in the habit of answering aloud. You hear of dragons and dreams and dead men. You sent my ancestors south once to fight against fire. Will you send my sons north to fight against ice? The leaves rustled, but if they said anything, it was in a tongue older than men. Footsteps sounded on the path behind him, careful, as if the walker feared to disturb whatever slept among the roots. Torrhen did not turn until the newcomer had reached his side. You are Cregan, he said quietly. His son nodded. In the dimness, his eyes seemed almost as pale as the weirwood's face. She spoke to you, Torrhen said. That woman, Visenya. Cregan swallowed. She spoke to all of us, father. To you more than most, Torrhen said. Your eyes were on her while the others watched the skull. Cregan hesitated. She looked tired, he said at last. Tired and angry and sad, as if she had been told the same story many times and no one had ever listened. Men prefer stories with heroes, Torrhen said. Not ones where the danger is far and the solution slower than their lives. Do you believe her? Cregan asked. About what lies beyond the wall? Torrin closed his eyes briefly. I believe the world is older than we are, he said. I believe there are things in it that do not care about our crowns. When my father sent me to the wall as a boy, the Lord Commander showed me a hand they had found beyond the gate. A man's hand, but with the flesh turned pale as milk and the nails black and long. It burned blue when they threw it on the fire. He opened his eyes again. So yes, I believe her. What will we do? Cregan whispered. We will guard our lands, Torrin said. We will tend to our people. We will send more strong men and true to the wall. We will build our own scorpions, perhaps. Not to shoot at dragons, but at whatever else comes out of the night. We will not bend the knee to Harren, nor to Keldon, nor to any man who thinks a higher chair makes him a god. His hand tightened on the weirwood. And when the winter she speaks of comes, if it comes, we will stand, as Starks always have. Cregan drew a breath that seemed to fill his narrow chest and stretch him taller. And the others? He asked. The south? The west? Dorne? Torrin's mouth twisted. Let Harren chase his dream of being first among kings, he said. Let Keldon count his coins and Mern his sheaves and Nymer his spears and Argilac his storms. We cannot make them see what they will not. We can only be ready for WHE. And they come crying for help. And if they never do? Cregan asked. Then we will still have done what is right, Torrin said. That is all a man can answer for. He turned then, studying his son's face in the dimness. One day, this crown will rest on your brow, he said. You will have to choose which stories to listen to. Remember tonight. Remember her words. Remember that there are enemies who do not march under banners. I will, Cregan said. He thought of the woman in black mail walking unarmed through a hall full of hostile men, of the way her dragon had flown just beyond the reach of bolts, watching. He thought of Aegon River's voice, quiet but steady, telling 7 kings that dragons could bleed. He thought of Winters in the tales, of white walkers and blue fires. He laid his own hand alongside his father's on the weirwood's carved face. I swear it, he murmured. Far above, on a tower that looked out over the lake, Aegon Rivers watched the green dragon dwindle into the eastern dark. The beast's wings beat slow and strong, each stroke a promise over the still waters of the god's eye. He did not know if he would ever see it again. Behind him, Harrenhal loomed, its towers like knives against the night. Within its walls, songs already began to rise, of Harren the Dragonbane, of the High King who might have been. Men would sing of tonight as a great gathering, a turning of ages. They would forget the weary lines on Visenya's face, the hesitation in the other kings' voices. They would remember only glory. Aegon hugged his cloak tighter around himself. The wind off the lake was chill, with a bite that tasted of something older than autumn. What do you see? Miriel asked, coming up beside him. She had wrapped herself in a dark shawl, but her hair escaped it in wild dark curls that flicked around her cheeks. The world, he said, trying to decide what it will be. And what will it be? She asked. Fractured, he said, like a pot dropped from a tower. The pieces will hold together a while, perhaps, held by habit and fear. But the cracks are there. Aegon tried to mend them with fire. Harren will try with iron. Both will fail. And what of you? She asked. What will you do? Aegon Rivers, bastard of Harrenhal, watcher of dragons? He thought of ships and storms, of foreign ports and strange tongues. He thought of the wall, a line of blue on a map. He thought of a dragon's scream and a queen's tired smile. I will watch, he said softly. And remember, the dragon vanished at last into the clouds, its shadow swallowed by the greater dark beyond. Years later, when songs had turned tonight into legend and men spoke of Aegon's folly and Harren's pride as if they had happened in another age entirely, there would be those who still told of the day the 7 kingdoms might have become one and did not. They would say that if Aegon had lived, or if Harren had been less proud, or if Keldon and Nymer and Mern had been more afraid, there might have been one realm and one king to stand when winter came. They would be wrong in 100 small ways and right in one great one. For the wall would stand, and the north would watch, and Dragonstone would brood upon its rock, and the rest of Westeros would go on as it always had. 7 kings, 7 banners, 7 prides. Wars would be fought over rivers and roads, over insults and inheritances. Essos would stir and stretch and send its shadows westward. Somewhere in the far cold north, something would wake. And when at last the snows came deeper and the nights grew longer, when the old tales clawed their way out of the dark with blue eyes and cold blades, the 7 kingdoms would meet them not as one, but as many. In the long tally of the world's days, men would argue still over where the fault lay, with a dragon queen who came too late, with a black king who reached too high, with a lion counting coins while the wind howled, with a wolf who could not make the others see the storm on the horizon. Aegon Rivers, grown gray and scarred, watching the first pale hints of that true winter creep down from the north, would only shake his head and think back to a day when a dragon fell at Harrenhal and the 7 kingdoms chose to stay as they were. He would remember the way the beast screamed, and the way the kings argued, and the way no one listened to the one voice in the hall that spoke not of crowns, but of night. And he would think, as he had thought that night on the tower with the wind in his hair and the dragon's shadow on the lake, that some stories were never meant to end in unity. Some were meant to fracture and splinter, to scatter like embers in a rising storm. The world would burn or freeze as it chose. Men had had their chance, in a black hall beneath a dragon's skull, to choose otherwise. They had not taken it.